and welcome back to Prep Talk Podcast. In this episode, we will learn about AP US History, one of the highly competitive AP History exams. To take the podcast further and answer the questions, we have with us to tell us in-house history faculty Sashwat Singh. Hello Sashwat, glad to have you back on the podcast. I hope you're excited for this one.
Yes, thank you, Vartika, for having me here.
Absolutely. So let's get started with the first question.
Sure.
So what all topics do AP History cover?
So AP US history covers topics that are mainly based in the American area. That would be more specific the United States area, right? So the first topic it covers is the pre-European America. Then that would be the formation of US. It then further narrows down, and then we have the Civil War, the post-Civil War era, the First and Second World War, the Vietnam War, and the modern US as we know it. So it is just basically the formation of the entire history of US.
Alright. So, considering that an Indian student would not understand US as much, however, we do have different history subjects from all over the world that they study in the school, but then this is entirely based out of US. So, who do you think should consider appearing for the subject, and what majors in college does this particular AP supports?
Okay. So first thing first, US history covers a lot of topics and a lot of events are there. So if a student has an interest in history and is aiming for a college in US, they can take this. It will help them in their college life as well. Apart from that, the various majors that you can go through with this is the African American studies, the administration, economics, history, geography, pre-law, sociology, pol science, mass communication, and international relations also is you can do with this.
Alright. So, these are the majors that
Yes, these are
would
the
benefit out of AP US history. Alright. So, what is the format of this exam?
So this entire exam is divided into two sections. Okay. So you have the first part. First section consists of two parts again. The first part is MCQ, 55 MCQs that you have to finish in 55 minutes. Then you have 3 short answer questions. In your second section, you have your FRQs, that would be your free response questions. So in the first part, you have your document based, in which you will be given 6 to 8 documents and you have to analyze them and present your answer from those documents itself. And for the last part, you have your essay. You are given choice out of 3 different time periods and you can write your essay on that.
Okay. So, US history can be entirely new subject for students planning for it. How would you suggest students strategize the exam?
To strategize this exam, you need to first get familiar with a lot of terms that are localized to United States. Okay. And you have to be familiar with a lot of events that a lot of Americans might know, but the rest of the world are not familiar with it. Right. And you also need to slowly and steadily note down each and every event, because there are a lot of events that are covering, and you will need to make a timeline of each event and what caused how and how they are related as well. So strategizing could be as simple as making a cheat sheet timeline, or you could make a table containing all the events and all the causes and effects of those events.
Okay, so now that we have discussed about the scoring topics, are they also the toughest topics you would say?
Yes, because these topics are so vast and they focus on it a lot. The papers focus on these topics a lot. These are one of the toughest topics as well. But I would say that it is subjective, and some students are interested in these topics because these are major world events. So students who find this interesting could score in this very well, and they would have a problem in more theoretical topics, right? But as I said, you need to practice in for any paper, and this is also the same goes for this as well.
Right. So, when can a student start with the preparation?
So your exam is in May. Okay. So you could begin your preparation in September and October. and you can give your exam in your 10th as well as 11th. I would not suggest 12th because that would be too late for your application process, but it could help you earn credits in your college. If a student is familiar with a lot of topics, they could finish it earlier, but usually it takes 5 to 6 months for proper study.
So we see that a student, if we take an average of the amount of test takers there are of AP, not everybody goes for just one AP, right? And considering history, it is a theoretical subject, and often, to diversify their profile, they often go for more practical subjects as well. So, which AP subjects are best fitted with AP US history?
So as you just mentioned, US history is a theoretical subject, right? So students generally take a more practical and a more logical. History is logical, but a more so they could take some logical subjects as well. But apart from that, I would suggest if a student is able to, they could go for world history, because a lot of topics would be overlapping, because in the later half of the second half of the world history, US is a major focus as well. So they could benefit from that, and they could also go for AP US government, so that would also help.
I think US government and US history would complement, and especially for probably the students who are going for pre-law kind of majors. For them, it will be a good club.
Definitely.
Okay. So how would you rate the difficulty level of this subject? As we know that world history is one of the toughest subjects, as you mentioned in the previous podcast. So how would you rate this as compared to that one?
It is also one of the toughest subjects. The thing is, a lot of history APs, you have to remember a lot of different points, different causation and effects, different correlations, and because of this, it makes the test a lot more difficult. And a lot of students who are sitting for these tests, they are either not prepared or they do not understand the layout of the test. So it leads to it being as a notion or a stereotype that this is a very difficult test. But if a student prepares for it and understands how to crack the exam, it is a smooth ride, as you might say.
The student should have a knack for theoretical subjects.
Analytical abilities as well,
Right.
because you would be analyzing a lot of text, historical text, and you would be answering a lot of MCQs as well based on that. So analytical and your critical thinking is highly important for this test.
Right. So now, since we are comparing, different AP subjects, so how would you say that AP World History is different from AP US History? Not in terms of, learning about different countries that we do in the world, US AP world, but some other factors that are relevant as a differentiating point.
Okay, so one of the clear things that you see while going through the two syllabus is the depth. So because the region in US AP US history is very limited, the depth of the topics are very deep. So you would need to understand every topic inside out. Okay, on the other hand, in world history, the number of topics might be vast and the number of countries might be vast, but the depth and understanding is not as deep as those of US history. Okay.
So, since I mentioned this earlier in the podcast as well, that AP US history is very centric towards America, right?
Yes.
So, how is it useful for international students? Probably someone who's coming from India, how is learning about US beneficial for them?
So, if a student is aiming for a US college, they'll be living there for 4 or 5 years, and most probably they'll be getting a job and settling down there. That is usually the main aims of students, right? So by understanding your the country that you are going to live in, its history, is helps you in settling down as well. Okay, so it also is one of the tougher exam, as I said, and it looks good on your application. because if you are able to score a 4 or a 5 on this exam, that means you have those skills required, right? So international students could aim for this as one of their APs.
Right. So, talking about the confusion that often appears in the mind of student whether they should go for the world history or the US history, are they correlated in any manner? Like, is world history also, does world history also have a part of US that they, have it in the syllabus? So, how would a student decide between the both?
I would give a very small example. For US history, it is a story, straight up story. You're going from one event to another, to another, to another, and each are interrelated with each other. Some might go back 50 years, some might go back 100 years, but they're somehow interrelated. And by the end of the story, you get to a place that is we are familiar with, that is the United States, right? For world history, it is a lot of disconnected entities that we are studying, but it is also a story in a sense that you are studying topics and somehow interconnecting them so that we understand the formation of the current global world that we have. US is of course a part of the world, so there are some topics that definitely overlap, and being a superpower in the 21st and 20th century, it is also one of the major topics in the second half of the syllabus. So if a student wants to go for a generalized understanding, they could go for world history, and for a specialized understanding, they could go for US history.
All right. So, with this, we come to the last question of this podcast. Some tips on how students can, learn better and score a good 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 in APUS history. And I really, when I ask you this question, I really want you to focus on how the students can learn the different timelines, because understanding is okay and learning the theory is okay, but then the problem that students face is learning what exact event happened at what timeline, what was the year. So when I ask you, I want to focus you to focus on this particular part, how to
Okay.
memorize the years.
So the AP US history, or any of the AP histories that we have, the European and the world one, the new format has stopped actually focusing on the years.
Okay.
They have started focusing more on the causation effect, as well as the general understanding of the time period. So you would not have a question as what happened in this year, or so on and so forth. Okay, so better would be for a student to learn what time period gave rise to what event, as well as what were the factors that led to that event, and how is that event important for our current world, right? So this would give a more holistic understanding. And you could also focus on the switching of time period. So you move from one era to another. So you move from War of Independence to the Civil War, or the French and the Indian War. So you understand how things changed from War of Independence to the French and Indian War, then to the Civil War. What were the things that were kept on changing and changing and changing, right? How things changed from the First World War, then to the interim war period, and to the Second World War. This could also help students memorize things, because you are no longer rote learning your years and timelines. You are understanding how things were, and then using that for analysis of the questions. So understanding the time period and understanding the era is more important than mugging up the years for any of the AP world exams. Now you need to understand that you could not place one of the Second World War events in pre-independence US, but you do not need to know the exact date and time as such. You could have a very broad understanding of dates. So the one of the major factors that students had problem in the dates, College Board helped lessen that burden, but it increased the understanding aspect of the much better.
All right. So since you're mentioning that dates are no longer, a question type, like the question wouldn't appear that what happened in 1947. So, but still, in a way, when you answer theoretically, since you said that there are
FAQs, yes.
short format and there are essays, so there the students need to mention the year they're talking about or they're writing about, right?
Yes.
So for that also you sort of need to
Mark up.
remember, yeah.
So events and timelines, you need to make a cheat sheet. I would not suggest to remember each and every event dates. Remember the important one. For example, on which date the Declaration of Independence was signed. That is an important, right? On which date the First World War started, or which date the Civil War started, or so on and so forth. You do not need to remember the dates of each and every minor events. Those are important for conceptual understanding. Those are not important for your date rote learning.
Okay. All right. Understood. So I think that was our last question for you. With this, we end today's podcast. Thank you so much for answering the questions.
Thank you for having me, Vatika.
Absolutely. So, to all the listeners, we hope this podcast was enlightening for you guys. And if you have any questions related to US history or world history for that matter, please comment them in the comment sections. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.